Will Self, here we are, up above London.
Yes, I like London. I find it very difficult to leave.
You do a lot of walking in London.
Yeah, quite a lot. I like to walk out of London. Every year, more or less, I walk out of London for about 100 miles along one of the points of the compass.
We'll save this for the actual interview, okay? I'm very excited now. Here we go. I'm going to put the battery in.
Okay.
And please, will you count us down? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
What is it about long distances that you enjoy? Walking.
Oh, well, you get a feel for the shape of the landscape. I mean, Richard Mabey, who I admire very much, is a writer about the natural world, and his famous book, The Unofficial Countryside, which really started that kind of edgelands idea about writing about the fringes of cities, said, well, you shouldn't treat cities as if they were natural phenomena and sort of try and hike through them. But actually, I think they are natural phenomena, and that's why I hike through them.
What's the furthest you've ever walked in one day?
Probably about 35 miles when I was walking to Harwich from London, up out of London along the Lee Valley. I think one of those days I did about 35 miles. Yeah.
Is that exhausting, or do you just love it?
Absolutely exhausting, yeah, because actually I'm not as young as I once was, like most people. Almost nobody you meet is younger than they once were, except possibly Bob Dylan. And 35 miles is a long way, and that was starting at kind of 6 a.m. and finishing after dark.
I think it's fair to say you're very tall, so you have a long
stride.
No,
it's not fair. It's not fair to say that. These things are relative.
Well, you're taller than me for a start.
Well,
around
right,
about
okay.
6'3".
Yeah, I'm fairly tall. I have a fairly long stride. In fact, I was talking to somebody from the LA Times yesterday who said that made all the difference. That's why I could walk these distances. But I don't think that's true. My 11-year-old son now walks with me, and he can do over 20 miles in a day quite comfortably.
Well, tell me how you would describe yourself in a sentence. It could be a long sentence.
How would I describe myself in a sentence? I think I'd be fairly prosaic. I'd just say, I'm a 51-year-old writer. I'm of Anglo-American descent, and I live in South London.
Are you easily annoyed by things?
Yeah, I think I'm fairly cantankerous. I mean, I'm definitely a glass with the bottom broken rather than half full or even half empty. I have a fairly... I remember my mother when she was actually terminally ill saying the good thing about being a pessimist is you always expect the worst to happen, so you're not wrong-footed when it does. And I think that probably being brought up by somebody with that kind of attitude formed my naturally gloomy disposition.
Do you enjoy a good debate?
Yeah, I'm less so than I used to, and I think that is a problem with all of us as we get older, that we're less willing, I think, with our peers to engage in serious debate, because when we see people of roughly our own age, we see people who are as entrenched as we are. People I do enjoy debating with are the young. And, I now do a bit of teaching at Brunel University, and I love doing that, and I love engaging with students because their minds are protean. And actually, if anybody's going to have an original idea, frankly, it's going to be them.
Do you see yourself first and foremost as a journalist or as an author?
Oh, as a writer of fiction. I just see myself primarily as a writer who happens to write in a number of different media. I grew the two careers more or less in tandem, actually because I'm probably better known as a journalist than as a novelist. People assume I was a journalist to begin with, but in fact the first kind of major bit of writing I did was fiction.
What is the best bit about your working life?
Oh, there are so many good things. It's such a privilege. I never understand writers who moan about their work and say how terrible it is. For me, it remains a delight. But I have to say, and this is a dreadful and upsetting thing for most of the people who are watching, the greatest thing about it, I think people understand this intuitively, which is why they're drawn to writers and actually why they go to literary festivals and things like that, is it's not having a boss. And it's not having a place of work, and it's being independent.
Can you explain to me what everythingitis is?
Everythingitis is a particular affliction of mine, which normally comes on me towards the end of working on a novel. My novels are quite big; they're quite compendious often. Particularly the last novel, Umbrella, had an absolute plethora of detail, cultural references, references to objects, manners of speech. It spanned 100 years. And when you're writing a big book like that, you have this tendency to think, well, the book has to be in some way a kind of synecdoche of the entire world. It has to be part for whole and whole for part.
No pressure then.
No pressure then. But you just get this creeping feeling that everything has to be in it. So you're wandering around the streets and you see a plastic comb lying in the gutter and you think, have I put plastic combs in the books? And you hear somebody say, to be honest, which they do all the time nowadays, and you think, have I got somebody saying, to be honest, in the book? And then you hear somebody refer to President Mobutu of Zaire, and you think, is President Mobutu in the book? And eventually it becomes this affliction called everythingitis.
We haven't got long left. Do you see
And we got time to get everything in.
Quickly, do you see yourself as an all-seeing deity in a way when you put on your author's hat? 10 seconds.
I don't think all-seeing deity in the fictional mode, but never in reality. No.
Are you happy?
Yes, right now I am. It's great views.
Well, so thank you very much. And this is totally cheating, but just quickly tell me, has the fact that you took drugs, including heroin in the past, do you feel that's followed you around in your career when you're spoken about or written about?
Less so now. I mean, it is a long time ago. I haven't used drugs. I've been clean and sober for 13 years, and my kind of high-profile disgrace it was in 1997. So there's now really a whole generation of people who really don't know about it, who aren't familiar with it. But yeah, to some extent it's followed me around, but then why wouldn't it? You know, it would be very surprising if it hadn't.
Will Self, thank you very much for taking a little bit longer than 5 minutes with me.
It's a pleasure.